Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for joining this live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about how the globalists have been using and still use the US economy and the US financial clout, how they use that to force other nations into signing on and being compliant to and with the globalist order. Now, countries like Australia and Canada and Britain and so on, and in fact every Western nation, they've all been they've all signed up to the globalist project. They're all running huge deficits, and that's being funded, if you like, by the globalist money machine, supported by the UN and the World Economic Forum, the World Bank. All these sorts of things have been, penetrated by the globalists. I mean, you may remember a name, and Google it if you haven't. A guy called Dominic Strauss-Kahn. He was a big player in the European sort of central bank, and he was very lukewarm about a lot of the globalist project, and they decided he had to be got rid of. And magically, a maid in his hotel room complained that he'd asked her to perform an intimate act, and within an incredibly short space of time, because just moments after that happened, he went straight to the airport to fly out to Paris, and within moments the police were onto it, the sign-offs, the top level State Department approvals were given, and they arrested the guy before his plane even took off. So from the time it happened to the time that it allegedly happened, there's still no proof at this point. It was just an allegation. To the time they arrested a very, very senior international bureaucrat, was maybe 3 hours. I mean, that's incredible. In anyone's language, that's incredible. Actually, detectives going on the plane, police officers going on the plane to drag the guy off. This is the power the globalists have. So even if you're a senior bureaucrat, revered and respected perhaps in your chosen profession or area or whatever, they've still got the power to get you and neutralise you if you get in the way of the globalist project. And the same goes for any country, and this is the treatment, if you like, that Russia's getting at the moment. Now, whatever you may or may not think about Vladimir Putin, and he doesn't claim that it's a democracy with free press or anything like that. But then the West isn't anymore either. Assuming it, maybe it once was, or a lot freer than it is now. But it certainly isn't now. Any dissenting voice can be crushed in seconds. So let's look at how the US uses the globalists rather use the US economy and have used it to gain compliance. Now I've mentioned this before, but I was on a plane once. I think it was New York to either Florida or maybe Dallas or something like that. But I just happened, I was in first class, happened to be sitting next to a member of a trade delegation from one of the Caribbean nations, which are small, very impoverished sort of nations. I can't remember which one, like it was Jamaica or one of those, that sort of thing. So the guy who was the son of one of the wealthy mafia goons in that particular island nation, he'd been picked just because he had the connections and he could go to New York to go to some of the nightclubs and that sort of thing, and he was hardly a serious business negotiator or anything like that. But he was nonetheless bewildered. He'd been educated in the West, so he spoke quite well and everything like that. And he was. So we were talking about it, and he said it was really strange. He said they just didn't want to talk about trade. The purpose of the meeting was trade between America and this. He said they just didn't want to talk about trade. What do you mean? What are you talking about? If it was a meeting about trade, surely somebody would have spoken. But no. He said all they talked about was that we had to set up divorce courts. We had to make sure it operated outside of our constitution, so arbitrary law could be provided. We had to ensure there was, vigorous child support and alimony agencies with arbitrary powers. We had to have arbitrary powers to seize money out of bank accounts, to seize money that was earned. We had to have arbitrary powers with detention and arrest, all on the basis it was, to protect the children and this sort of thing. And various other things all of it to do with social engineering. Social engineering had nothing to do with trade, nothing, not even a bit. Now, it's already a dirt poor place, so wages were already, at the bottom, at ground level. So it's not like empowering women was going to lower wages even more. I mean, they could hardly get any lower in that place. So what was the purpose of this? It was purely social engineering. And he was bewildered by it. Well, I thought they'd want to talk about trade. That's all they wanted to talk about. And but that's a classic example of how the US used its power. Now, if they threatened the delegation if they didn't comply, as the US saw fit. Also, gay lesbian issues as well was pushed on them. So clearly social engineering here. But if they didn't comply, then the Americans would make sure that cruise ships, with all those rich tourists and everything, cruise ships wouldn't stop at the island. Various grants and subsidies that came from like the World Bank or the UN or whatever, they could choke all that off, and these corrupt mafia goons would be losing shitloads of money out of it. If they had property in the US or elsewhere, that could be made to they could encounter all sorts of problems using the American banking system for their own personal finances and so on. So they were threatened left, right, and centre and slapped around and treated like children. You do this or else. Now, they've really got to detach themselves for their own people. They've got to say, we don't care about our own people. We're going to look after our own skins here. We're going to make sure our own income and our own lavish lifestyle is kept intact. And if we've got to take that out of the hide of our fellow citizens, well, hey, we can't afford to go against the Americans. They'll destroy us, and we'll lose out. Our fellow citizens won't gain, so we might as well look after ourselves in the process. And I'm sure the whole thing was packaged up to achieve just that sentiment. Now, that's pretty much how it's spread across the Western world. A lot of the elites have become very, very rich, far richer than they ever could have, under the pre-globalist system. The rest of the population has become poor. Their prospects have, diminished out of sight, and we're all pretty. The West has been impoverished on a relative basis to a degree that I couldn't have imagined, 25, 30 years ago. So this is sort of an example, a micro example of how the Americans can do it now. Well, the American economy can do it. Now, the globalists are obviously in the key positions in the UN and the World Bank, and all these sorts of places are in the key positions before they achieve the key positions in, say, the body politic or in the public service institutions in the US. That would have been sort of the second phase. But this is how they're able to do it. Now, any country that's in a bit of economic trouble and needs International Monetary Fund loans and needs a patient and sort of indulgent set of institutions, whether it be the UN or anything else. They need. This is where they become weak. They need that forbearance, and the Americans say, "Well, what are you doing about gay, lesbian, this? What are you doing about women's rights, that?" And it's not that they're interested in women's rights or gay, lesbian stuff. Far from it. Far from it. But it's a way of destabilizing and demoralizing a society, and they know that, and that's why they do it and why they insist on it. It's the quickest way to undermine the democratic process and the rule of law, doing all these sort of things, because there's always a higher moral authority. The vote may be important, the law may be important, due legal process may be important, but what's more important is transgender bathrooms. Okay, that is the moral high ground. That is the one. And so, but by using these sort of moral high ground imperatives that trump all else, then they can effectively diminish everything that makes the West what it is, the democratic process, the sharing of power, the due legal process, the rule of law, and so on. There's always a higher moral purpose that is able to overcome all the laws and the regulations and so on. So this is I think how, I'm pretty sure, how they achieved it. And the smaller countries can be slapped around at will. You've got a tougher time slapping around a richer country. But whether it's you get them today or you get them tomorrow or or whatever. It doesn't matter. Or you can engineer a run on their currency, for example. So suddenly it's devalued, or it's artificially overvalued, and they can't export their products when it's overvalued. So their economy shrinks and they lose jobs, and there's all sorts of political fallout. So they have to go begging to the world, the International Monetary Fund for a bridging loan, or for some indulgence of one sort or another. And that's when we'll do it, but we want you to have gender studies in every university, not because they want gender studies or because gender studies has any value, but because it's a way to destabilize and demoralize the society. And so that's what's happening now. It's much harder to get into countries like Russia. Putin won't put up with that sort of stuff. No, I'm not going to have that gay rights crap, or I'm not going to have activists running around pretending to care about gay rights, but really trying to undermine our society. I'm not going to have people running around screaming racism, or insisting on gender studies at universities. He's not going to have all that. I'm not going to have people denouncing Christians as evil. And so all the things, all the tools that the globalists have to cause societal destabilization, they can't effectively use them in places like Russia or, say, Hungary. Now, they can rant and rave, Nazi, fascist, and misogynist. They can do all that crap, but the point is that they can't get around. They just can't insert those destabilizing influences into Russia. And it drives them crazy. And so, for example, there was I wouldn't call it democratically elected, but an elected government in Ukraine. I think it's in 2014, 15, or whatever it was. They got thrown out, and there was all this celebration of the gay revolution and the feminist revolution, this, that, and the next thing. And of course, that was all nonsense. These are devices to destabilize Ukraine and turn it into a flunky client state that they can use to annoy Russia. That's all it's for. Now, and then these are very much the tools of destabilization. Now, if they can't successfully destabilize a country using those tools, and there are strong men like Saddam Hussein and Gaddafi and Assad in Syria and so on, and they won't put up with that nonsense. So what do the Americans do, or the globalists push the Americans to do? Well, invade the motherfuckers. Just nuke them, bomb them back in the Stone Age. Do what the fuck you have to. Now, what's replaced, of course, what were stable sort of nation states previously. What's replaced them are basket cases. It's all Syria's managed to hang on, but Iraq's had serious problems, and in fact it's still an unstable, barely standing on its feet nation state. Libya's a basket case where they openly have slave markets in the cities and so on. I mean, it's insane that could be happening now, but there you go. So nothing's been achieved by things, but this is what they do if they can't get their way by destabilizing society. They'll just invade it. Now, Russia's another matter. They can't just go in there and slap Russia around. The military's too big, and again, there's the nukes, the nuclear weapons situation. So they can try and isolate them and turn them into pariah state, which they've been busily and assiduously doing. You can tell it's a globalist project as well. If the globalists want it done, and if MSNBC and CNN are screaming, Putin this, Nazi fascist, then it's part of the globalist project. It could be nothing else other than that. So now China gets a free pass, even though you could say that they're even a worse world citizen than Russia is. But China they're prepared to treat their peasants like shit to do all that manufacturing stuff for the finished goods that go to the West. But also they're prepared to allow the American elites, the globalist elites, to get very rich through all sorts of graft and corruption and so on. So China kind of gets a free pass because of that. But you got to wonder if the day of reckoning is coming. And you got to wonder if the price for the globalists to say, well, we're getting all this corrupt money from China. I'm living in $100 million waterfront fucking mansion with my own Learjet and helipad and all this sort of stuff. Do I really give a fuck about Taiwan? Do I really care? So you've got to be wondering, on the balance of it, the globalists are thinking, maybe we should just let the Chinese have Taiwan. The downside is it projects Chinese power, 500 kilometres or more into the Pacific there, and widens their sphere of influence very substantially. Whether that's a good thing down the track, but I don't know if these globalists even think that far ahead. They think I'm going to get fucking rich tomorrow. I don't give a fuck about Taiwan today or Taiwan tomorrow. I want this. I want to get rich now. So maybe that's an issue there. But that's my take on it. The American economy has been used, for 40 plus years to heavy other countries into complying with the globalist project, and particularly those factors of destabilisation destabilisation along gender lines, race lines, sexuality lines, and so on. They're guaranteed destabilisers, and the globalists just use them. I mean, it's 101 globalist copybook stuff, and this is what they've been doing, and that was a very micro example of it. When I was sitting next to that guy on the plane talking about that Caribbean island. You've been Tassus today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.